Okay, study this board really fast, because this is what we're going to talk about today. Except, we're going to kick it new school. We're going to try something totally different today. I'm going to ditch the whole whiteboard thing. It's time for an evolution. And that, my friends, is going to start our next deep dive, which is actually going to be on Girafarig, as you probably saw on the whiteboard, but I'm planning on changing it up because it's getting kind of tedious to go back and forth between the two formats that I have set up for one video versus the other video, and then I have to move the tripod, move all the lights, and move this, and move that. So I just want one consistent thing. And depending on how this video goes, let me know if you just flat out prefer the whiteboard because it would be super easy just to put it up on the wall right here, or if you like this new thing because it's different, it's something new. Okay. Anyways, let's actually get into Girafarig today. So Girafarig is a normal and psychic type Pokemon maxing out at 2046 CP. So that's actually a pretty decent CP for the Great League. Maxing out around 1500, not too much further north than 2000 is usually a pretty good indicator there. Now to get into the Great League, our best possible stat product with our IV spread is going to be at a 0, 15, and 12 at level 28. So it's a 0 on attack, 15 defense, and 12 stamina, which does actually equal 1500 on the dot, which is always super satisfying. Now, compared to all of the Pokemon in the Sinister Cup, we do actually rank 67th in bulk and 55th in stat product, which is actually not too horrible. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how many there are in the cup, but that's actually not too bad. And of course, all of this does come from our base stats with a 182 on attack, 133 on defense, and a 172 in terms of our stamina there. So those aren't the greatest numbers in how they line up, but again, we know that it can kind of help there, but it's mainly the moves that we're really concerned about. So let's actually go ahead and get into those. So Tackle and Confusion are our two fast moves that we have here. Tackle ranking at 2 energy per turn for 3 damage per turn. Since we do actually carry that normal typing though, we do get bumped up to a 3.6 after Stab. Confusion works very similar, except it's a 3 energy per turn for a 4 damage per turn, which does get bumped up to 4.8 after Stab, which is actually pretty freaking good. As we know, Confusion is that one fast move inside of the psychic typings that generally just tends to shine. It's one of the better fast psychic type moves, and for Girafarig to have it here is a pretty wonderful thing because it actually gives it a ton of damage right off the bat, especially towards some of the specific Pokemon in the cup like the fighting types and I mean some of the other awkward typings that you may encounter. Either way, generally the psychic type move here, Confusion, is the one that you want to go with. Next, moving on to our charge moves, we do have Psychic, which is confusing. We do have Thunderbolt, and then we do have Mirror Coat. So Psychic here ranks in at Psychic here clocking in at 70 energy per turn for 100 damage per turn for a 1.43 damage per energy ratio. After Stab though, it does get bumped up to that 120 on the damage for a 1.71 damage per energy ratio. Thunderbolt clocking in at 55 energy for 90 damage at a 1.64 damage per energy ratio, but because we do not carry that electric typing, we do not get any kind of stab bonus there. Next we have Mirror Coat, which is actually 55 energy for 60 damage, so actually a little bit worse than Thunderbolt with a 1.09 on the damage per energy ratio. And I mean, if you basically just set these down side by side and you just put on your parenting cap and you just try to talk to these 3 charge moves and you ask Mirror Coat why they suck so bad, you're just going to be a disappointed parent, okay? Psychic and Thunderbolt just make so much more sense here. There's no reason that you should really want to go with Mirror Coat unless for some oddball reason you chose maybe Tackle because you already had a decent Confusion user on your team and you just really wanted more psychic type damage. I don't know. Mirror Coat is that awkward move that you should try to avoid as if it's the plague because it's not going to do a whole lot for you in this cup. Next, let's actually move on to some shielding scenarios here. So we're going to start with the entire Sinister Cup first, and we're going to go through 4 different shield scenarios. PvPoke actually recently changed it. It's actually gone up from 23 to 26. participants that are actually considered the top meta choices. So we'll look at all 26 of those in some various shield scenarios, and then we'll actually break down into those even deeper. So starting out with our entire cup situation here, we do have a 33% when it comes to the 0 versus 0 shield scenario. That's unfortunately rather low. Usually I like to see, if we're even shields, I'd like to see something around 50%, if not a little bit better, because if we're at the exact same shield advantage between myself and my opponent, we probably shouldn't be losing too many or winning too many unless we're just really bad or really good, depending on which kind of number you get there. So unfortunately 33% is a little low for me, but coming up next we have the 2 versus 0, which is a 92.5, which is actually really, really strong. And I was looking at some of the Pokemon that we end up losing up against here, because if you think about it, if we have 2 full shields and the opponent doesn't have any, I kind of would like to know which Pokemon still end up beating us when we have complete advantage there. And we'll talk a little bit more about these later, but basically a ton of the steel types give us tons of problems here, because the steel typing is gonna, it's gonna have a big deal with the psychic types. It's not really gonna have to take too much damage from those. And oddly enough, a lot of these Pokemon are also steel and rock. And then there's some other weird things in there. Mainly when you get into the meta, there's a lot of steel and rock types. Either way, Thunder is not gonna help us out there either, so we're just kind of stuck battling up against a typing that we literally have 0 answers for. Next we move into our 0 versus 2 shield situation, which is a unbelievable 10.8. We do actually hit that double digits, which is usually what I'm looking for there, which is actually really good. It's just not amazing. It's kind of just like, hey, we hit the mark. Good. Last but not least, we do have the 2 versus 2, which is a 48.4%. So that's actually looking a lot closer to what I'm looking for whenever I look at an even shield scenario. Something that's really close to 50% really does help out a ton. If we have even shields, I'd like to think that most Pokemon would just either flat out beat us or flat out lose. Next, moving into the meta situations here, we're actually going to start with our 0 versus 0, which is a 42.3%. So definitely already looking a lot better than it did up against the entire cup there. Next, we move into the 1 versus 0, which is a 69.2%. Nice. Then we move into the 0 versus 1, which is a 3.8%. That's horrible. That's horribly low. That's super, super low. Unfortunately, Girafarig just does not want to get caught with its shields down. It definitely wants to have a shield up at all times, which I'll make a comment on in just a second. Last but not least, we do look at our 1 versus 1 up against the entire meta, which is a 30.8%, which is, like I said, I'd rather see something closer to 50%. Kind of just gives some more legitimacy in my mind. It gives some more head math, like clarity, if we at least have a 50% there. So unfortunately, what it looks like is we're kind of in an awkward position, because up against the entire cup, if you're looking at a cup that maybe your local meta doesn't run a ton of like super high class, I don't know why I said high class, they don't run like a lot of the top meta choices. If they just end up running a lot of off meta picks, Girafarig is actually a really good opener. It's actually going to do a lot better opening rather than closing, is what I should say there. 48.4% versus that 33.3 definitely tells us that we'd rather open rather than close with Girafarig. But if you're going into a meta situation where there's just a ton of top meta picks, if you know that these people are going to be counting their fast moves, if you know that people are going to be choosing, you know, a specific moveset because their team comp is like super cool and they're really like on fire, then you're actually going to end up performing a little bit better as a closer here, which is kind of awkward if you think about it, because that 42.3% in the 0 versus 0 versus that 30.8 in the 1 versus 1 really says that we should close rather than open. But that's the complete opposite of what we are up against the entire cup. Kind of rough there. So to figure out some more in-depth analysis on these 1 versus 1 shield scenarios up against the entire meta, let's actually break down every single match that we have here. So up against the wins in terms of our 1 versus 1, not too many of these, unfortunately. That 30.8 is kind of low. We do have Haunter, we do have Poliwrath. Now the Poliwrath it's a win, but there's 3 different variants now in PvPoke. If you have Bubble, Mudshot, and you have Power Up Punch. So if you're running Bubble and Power Up Punch, Mudshot and Power Up Punch, and then Ice Punch is your third move, then you basically are going to lose to the Girafarig. You, as Girafarig, will actually beat that Poliwrath. But on the flip side of things, there is a moveset of Poliwraths that actually beats Girafarig, which we'll talk about here in a second. Next, in terms of wins, we do have Banette, Drifblim, Lugia, Dusclops with Hex specifically, and Gallade. All of those are actually going to be wins for us, which is okay. Now, in terms of our losses, though, here's where it gets kind of interesting. Girafarig, of course, is going to be a tie, but Poliwrath with Bubble and Dynamic Punch. So if you actually drop the Power Up Punch completely and you run Ice Punch with Dynamic Punch, you're actually going to be able to beat the Girafarig. Next, though, we do have Alolan Marowak, which does actually end up beating us on both movesets. Whether it's Hex or Fire Spin, it actually does beat us. Then we have Claydol, Cresselia, we do have Medicham. If it actually runs Dynamic Punch or Power Up Punch, both movesets actually end up beating the Girafarig. Then we do have Bastiodon, Empoleon, Dusclops with Feint Attack actually will beat the Girafarig. Then we have Gardevoir, Probopass, Alolan Raichu, Steelix with both Dragon Tail and Thunderfang is going to win. Then we do have Mawile, and last but not least Bronzong rounding out our losses. Whew, holy cow. So if we break this down even further and we look into the exact typing of each one of these Pokemon to try to figure out what our role as Girafarig should really be, you can kind of tell that in the Ghost typing, we actually have 3 losses, which actually isn't too bad, but it's kind of, it would be okay to go up as the Ghost typings. You do have this resistance for the normal typing, but you also do have that weakness because of your Psychic typing, so you end up getting like this weird, sometimes like close to neutral damage. If I'm not mistaken, the Pure Immunity is going to actually drop the super weakness to a slight bit of a resistance, not quite neutral. Either way though, the Ghost typings are going to be kind of awkward. You do lose to the Alolan Marowak, whether it's the Hex variant or the Fire Spin, they're both just going to beat you, either way you look at it. Dusclops with Feint Attack also going to give you quite the problem, but you actually can beat the one with Hex, so take that for what it's worth, I guess. In terms of the actual Psychic typing, so basically going up against our own typing here, Claydol, gonna be a big problem. Cresselia, gonna be a giant wall. Medicham, gonna have some fighting moves that actually end up doing a lot of neutral damage. It doesn't matter if it's Power Punch or Dynamic Punch, we still end up losing though. And then we do have Gardevoir, Alolan Raichu, and Bronzong, all has the Psychic types that give us problems. And basically, a lot of these just come down to we just don't have any. Even like at worst case scenario, our best neutral damage is Thunderbolt. And it just kind of sets us behind immediately because our fast move is going to be pushing out a ton of resisted damage off the bat, which is just kind of unfortunate. Next, in terms of the fighting typings, which is where I would kind of suggest that the main shtick of Girafarig kind of starts to pay off here. We only end up having 2 Pokemon that give us problems here. Poliwrath with Bubble, Dynamic Punch, and Ice Punch can actually end up beating us. Medicham, of course, again, whether it's Power Punch or Dynamic Punch, already going to give us some problems. We've already talked about that. But the fighting types in general, the typical fighting types are going to give you some problems. Poliwrath is one of those weird ones where he kind of inches through in a lot of scenarios because he has that Mudshot, or he has Bubble, and then he also has Power Punch. He kind of like wiggles his way through. But like Medicham, Lucario, things like that, they all have like Counter and then Power Up Punch. Those are starting to kind of fall off a little bit because Power Up Punch got nerfed. Medicham, unfortunately, still being as bulky as he is, does break through and actually end up beating Girafarig, but in general, Girafarig up against the fighting types is going to be kind of like what it's really good at. Last typing here is the Steel typing, which unfortunately we have a ton of losses here. Like I talked about earlier, Bastiodon, Empoleon, Probopass, Steelix, whether it's Thunderfang or Dragon Tail, Mawile, and Bronzong all end up beating us here. So some pretty big names there, and some pretty hard losses that you have to swallow. Unfortunately, it's just kind of like I talked about with the Psychic types, we don't really have anything to just come out of the gate at worst neutrally with. Our fast move is going to be resisted by a ton of those Pokemon, and in some cases even double resisted, so we just kind of end up at a kind of an uphill battle right out of the gate. So that is actually going to be it for Girafarig today, guys. In terms of like all around, like what's my opinion on Girafarig? Unfortunately, I'm still not a believer. I don't feel like Girafarig brings enough to the coverage table to warrant a spot on just any team. He's not gonna just stand on his own without some sort of help. Now, there is something to be said if you were to build your team around psychic damage for whatever reason. If you wanted to, you know, kind of just boost up Girafarig, kind of make Girafarig the main star, yeah, you could probably make a couple of tweaks here and there to make that work out pretty decent, but I just don't feel like Girafarig is strong enough to build a team around to begin with. So, kind of unfortunately going to make it a little bit of a no-go for me personally. But that is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. As always, thank you guys for being patient because it's been crazy. Again, let me know what you think of the new setup. I'm hopefully doing something really cool with the background at this point. If I'm not, then shame on future me. Why aren't you doing something cool? Either way, always remember that the Discord is down in the description below. Okay, that's it. I'll play those ending credits. Bye. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.